I'd like to first apologise for the technical difficulties we've been having, and I'm going to start now. Who are the real professionals? What is a state of a nation? And why is this man with bushy eyebrows talking at me? The Young Rail Professionals is an organisation that aims to promote the railway industry as a great place to work and inspire and develop the next generation of railway talents. I'm very excited that tonight we are with three of our industry's leaders who will help us with the second question. We've got Tim Woods, Northern Powerhouse Rail Director at Transport for the North, David Horne, Managing Director of London North Eastern Railway, Non-Exec Director of the RSSB and Non-Exec Director of Make It York, and Maggie Simpson, Director General of the Rail Freight Group. I'd like to send a massive thank you to all the speakers for their time this evening. As for the third question, I'm the Regional Chair of the North East Committee, and today I am broadcasting from my grandmother's kitchen, so thank you to Grandma. Our panellists tonight are going to give us their perspectives on the state of play for our railway and what we have to look forward to. During the webinar, if you want to send in any questions, please do, and we'll make a selection of these questions and put them to the panel at the end of the talks. With no further delay, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Director General of the Rail Freight Group, Maggie Simpson.
Prize of £60, which we will take. That will be in the vouchers of your choice. So you can treat yourselves, do something from
how do you find it out?
Supermarkets.
Google.
That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to do. But
okay, are we?
Yeah, also going to have.
Oliver, thank you very much. I can all hear me, so it's a pleasure to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I run the Rail Freight Group. We are a trade association and we represent businesses across the rail freight sector. So that includes train operators, end customers, ports, terminals, support services, consultancies, lawyers, Network Rail, and pretty much anyone who has an interest in the movement of rail freight in this country. And as an organisation, our aim is quite simple. We aim to increase the amount of goods that are moved by rail freight. So it's an absolute pleasure for me to be here tonight and speaking to you via this slightly unusual webinar method. So, it's probably the most challenging time I think that many of us have lived through at the moment. It's a privilege, I think, to be here tonight, not just talking about the situation that we find ourselves in, but also looking to the future and what will happen when things return to normal. But I didn't think we could start without at least paying some regard to the situation that we find ourselves in. We're going to hear from David Horne later on, and I know that for businesses like David's, the situation is really surprising, going from a situation of extended growth and real opportunity to one with a skeleton timetable, and very difficult situations for staff who are public facing on the ground and trying to keep morale high against an uncertain future. Yes, equally for people who work at Network Rail or in the TOCs, there is at least a sound financial position today backed by government, and many of you who've dialed in tonight, I'm sure, work for businesses who are not in that situation. Supply chain, freight, and others are finding it exceptionally challenging at the moment. Cash flow, liquidity are all issues that are keeping people awake at night, and it is literally a struggle to survive for some businesses. I know in our industry we've got companies who've closed down their operations, furloughed their staff, particularly in our end customer base, and others who are operating at very significantly reduced levels. Rail freight itself is somewhere between 30 and 50% down at the moment, and when that happens overnight, it's a difficult challenge to get through. And whilst government support is there in some areas, it absolutely isn't there in the areas where we're needing it at the moment. So that's another challenge that we're working through. And I think we genuinely expect the railway sector in the broadest sense to be changed by this crisis in ways that we don't know yet. But yeah, there are some real upsides emerging as well. I don't know who this gentleman was who landed in our Twitter account the other day, but he, like many people out there at the moment, has actually suddenly begun to realise the real value that rail freight is delivering for our economy. It's nice to see it recognised in a tweet, and particularly also so in some of the press coverage that we're getting at the moment from Network Rail and from the regional press, highlighting just exactly what it is that we're doing for the economy. And I think if I look at that, that gives me real hope for the future, a realisation that the things that we do in our sector are of real value. And when I look at where we were before this crisis started, things were going really well. Period 13 of this year was the biggest ever volume of aggregates moved on rail in any period ever. And we'd seen sustained growth in intermodal and other sectors as well. So we've got some really good basis on which to start back to growth when this crisis abates, as I know it will in time. But tonight isn't to talk about the current crisis. Tonight is to talk about the future for rail freight, and in particular what that means for the north of England. This particular photograph was shared to me by John Smith, the Managing Director of GB Rail Freight. He's called it floods, plague and pestilence, which I think is how he views matters at the moment. You might have a point, to be honest. Because despite all that nature has thrown at them in the floods and with the coronavirus, the trains keep running. Here, coming away from Drax Power Station, which you can see in the top of the picture, having delivered biomass into their fuel tanks. Drax Power Station delivers somewhere between 5 and 8% of the nation's electricity, so it's probably fueling this webinar right now. And it's being fueled by our trains bringing biomass in from the ports at Liverpool, Immingham and Hull on a daily basis. Now, these trains have been something of a cause célèbre in our industry since they started running. The routing that they have to take across the Pennines is rather protracted because the main route has no capacity for freight on it. And this means that journey times of 7 to 9 hours between the port and the power station are not uncommon. That impacts on asset utilisation, the number of locos and wagons that we need, and the number of drivers we need to run those trains. Now this week, because of the drop down in passenger services, they're being sent via Diggle, the main route over the Pennines, and they're getting there in 4 hours. In fact, some of them are doing it in 3.5, arriving early. And it just goes to show what a drag it is for us under normal circumstances, because the capacity simply doesn't exist where we need it on the network. And that lack of capacity is something that we see increasingly often across the railway, and it's impacting on passenger and freight, but particularly in our sector, something that's a real prohibitor to further growth. So where do we need that capacity on the network if we wish to do more? Certainly Transpennine corridor is a key artery where there's very little, if no, freight capacity at all, and real shifting trade patterns that command that we try to run more trains across that axis. Most links to ports are challenged. The route to Felixstowe's had an upgrade, but the trains are struggling to get much beyond Ipswich. The cross-London corridor is congested for ports down on the Thames side. And equally, the trunk routes, the East Coast and the West Coast main line, where people are looking to run more services, are also struggling. And I'm sure Tim will be reflecting later on Northern Powerhouse Rail in High Speed 2, and we've high hopes for that in terms of a way of producing additional capacity on those key corridors. And actually getting into city centres with particularly construction materials, but hopefully also retail products, is also a challenge for us with the demands of the passenger services into our major cities. Why, though, do we think we need this extra capacity? The reason I think that we need it is that our customers are really ambitious for more services. The train here is being hauled by Maritime Transport. They use DB Cargo as their haulier, but the train is sponsored by them, it's filled by them, and it's handled at either end by them. Maritime Transport are not a conventional railway business. In fact, they're a road haulage firm. They're the third largest container haulier in the country on road. But they've moved into rail in a big way in the last few years. They now have terminals at Trafford Park, at Wakefield, in Birmingham, and most recently at the newly opened East Midlands Gateway Terminal, which had its official launch back in February. So why is a business like Maritime turning to rail? Well, HGV drivers are in short supply. Ageing demographic of drivers, Brexit meant that many of the drivers who came from Eastern Europe went back to Eastern Europe, and the demands of the sector aren't really suiting the sort of flexible working and lifestyle that people today often want. So for a company like Maritime Transport, if they can do 50 loads behind a single freight locomotive, that's 50 drivers they don't have to find. And they can utilise the drivers they do have into cities and into the places where they really need them. But it's not only that. Road costs have risen in recent years with the driver shortage kicking in, and there are very significant environmental concerns which are bringing people to rail as well. And finally, we're seeing some shifting trade patterns on the back of Brexit, people moving away from roll-on, roll-off road transport onto lift-on, lift-off container transport, which is helping rail further. I mentioned their new terminal at East Midlands Gateway. It's an amazing location. If you go past it on the motorway, you can catch a glimpse of it. It's a £100 million investment by property developers Segro and by Maritime. As part of that development, they've levelled the site, they've built a bus interchange, they've built a bypass around Kegworth, remodelled the motorway junction, included a rail connection, and are already building out the warehousing, which has gone to a number of household names, people like Nestle and others who are on site there. And those customers are already pushing to use the rail facility. Up until the COVID crisis, there were 2 or 3 daily services already running in there. And that isn't the only location where this happens. The iPort at Doncaster opened a year ago and has 8 daily trains into there now. We've seen planning consent granted for a similar site at Northampton, and in Scotland, the site at Moss End International has broken ground this year with a view to opening sometime during 2021. So this is terrific news because by putting the warehousing on the railhead, it makes for really efficient logistics. But some parts of the country don't have the access to these facilities. Despite several attempts, facilities in London and the South East have failed to get planning permission, and the north of England is underrepresented too, really reliant on more conventional container handling facilities at Trafford Park and Leeds. So a real need for making a planning framework which helps our developers to build these facilities in the places that the market wants them. And I have to emphasise that all that money, that 100 million that's gone in, that's all private sector investment. There isn't any government money going into that. What we need is the capacity on the network to match with the investment that people are making. And it isn't just in the road haulage and logistics business where we're seeing this investment. We're seeing very significant investments in ports, places like Teesport and Liverpool, investing on their on-site rail, and also in the construction market, which I've also mentioned, where we've seen numerous new facilities open and investments in high-capacity wagons as well, often owned by the customer. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because I think this is a huge driver for growth, is the carbon agenda. We can't have missed the fact that the UK economy has to decarbonise by 2050 through legal requirements that have been set by our government. In Scotland, that is a 2035 target, and there's an interim target to get all diesel trains off the network by 2040. So we're working really hard with government to try and see how we can best decarbonise the freight locomotives and our services across the country. But actually today, even if we did nothing else, a modal shift to rail is helping decarbonise our economy. Moving by rail produces a quarter of the carbon dioxide that making the equivalent journey by road does. And whilst the road freight sector is making good inroads in van technology and use of batteries, the battery or hydrogen-powered HGV remains elusive, and the distribution network that supports it is a long way behind. So moving more goods by rail freight today saves carbon, but nobody can be complacent about that, and we're not. Last year we made an increase of 12% in the amount of trains that were electrically hauled, and that reduced carbon intensity by 4% across the whole of the operations. Actually, further reducing it is challenging if we can't get access to more overhead wires, and that's why we're pushing at government really hard to start reopening the discussion on electrification. I know we're not a lone voice in that. The supply chain is working very hard, and there's a lot of political pressure to move on electrification. Absolutely, we're part of that story and trying to make the case to government for doing that. The workhorse of the rail freight industry, the Class 66 locomotive, it might not look pretty, but it's a great piece of kit. The oldest of those are coming up to 20 years old now. So in the next 10 to 15 years, the operators will be looking at what they're going to replace them with. And we have to be in a position where that's an electric bi-mode, something like the one you can see there on the picture. In order to do that, we need to make progress now on investment schemes to electrify the network. And whilst that sounds daunting, I actually think that you can do that in a staged approach, which actually makes it quite easy. We've already spoken to government about the small sections they could do which could unlock incremental services on electric haulage. The route down to London Gateway Port, the link into some of the terminals in the Midlands, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, which could mean whole trains could switch from diesel to electric. From Teesport up to Scotland, we need the power supply upgrading and a few more wires into the port, and then we could convert 3 or 4 trains a day over to electric haulage. What about the route upgrades? Tim will talk about Transpennine, I'm sure, getting that electrified so that we can use that with electric traction. Can we get extensions from the existing network down to major freight hubs? Can we get, for example, from the Great Western Main Line to the Mendip quarries? People in the industry reckon about 300 miles of electrification could convert probably something like 2/3 of the flows and would definitely make the tipping case for making more use of electric traction and investing in new locomotives. So this has to be an absolute priority for us as we move forward. So by way of summary, the future for rail freight really does look encouraging, whatever the current crisis or economy is throwing at us. Yes, there will be some setbacks from that, but the fundamental drivers that are bringing people to rail, the environment, road driver shortage, road congestion, are not going away anytime soon. And they're things that we can help with for the economy and bring growth to our sector as well. Customer confidence in rail is strong, and mode shift is a hugely important part of decarbonisation. Customers and new customers as well are looking for new products and new services that we can help to deliver. And for the north of England, I think those opportunities are really strong, particularly so as we move to rebalance the economy and bring more prosperity, manufacturing and trade into the cities in the north of England. And if we're going to do that, what do we need? Capacity, absolutely. Capacity, 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 including on the Transpennine corridors and on the key arterial routes across the north of England. A planning system that supports the private investment and creates the new terminals and the state-of-the-art locations that we need. A framework that helps to support rail freight, whether that's at national government or within regional and local government. And electrification to support further decarbonisation. I think the current crisis demonstrates how rail freight is an absolutely vital part of UK freight and logistics. We want to do more, and I'm confident that we can do more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I really like hearing about the benefits of freight. It's, like you say, something really important in taking a lot of freight off the roads. It's incredible the amount of freight that can fit into rail freight, and taking those carbon dioxide emitting lorries off the road, so cars can actually use the road, and also to sort of take that eyesore away. And I know you mentioned the Transpennine route upgrade. Well, I work on the Transpennine route upgrade, Maggie, so I'll see what I can do.
Please do.
Thank you. So thank you, Maggie. I'd like to now introduce David Horne, Managing Director of London North Eastern Railway, Non-Exec Director of the RSSB, and Non-Exec Director of Make It York. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. Great to be part of this evening, and well done on for the YRP North East Committee to resort to technology so that this event can continue. So I'm going to talk to you this evening about 5 C's, which I'm going to take you through. And first of all, I'm going to talk you through our approach to the customer. So hopefully you can see that now. The life of LNER began 2 years ago in June 2018. And as a relatively new operator, we wanted to take the opportunity to really think about what our customers truly wanted from us and the role that we play in their lives. And what just put up on the screen is some of the way that we did that. I'm not sure what's happened to the pictures on the right hand side, but we did a massive engagement event, a series of workshops up and down the business with frontline staff, employees from throughout the company, as well as representatives from customers and communities, to really understand what did we need to do as a business to ensure that we were putting our customers first. Our ambition at LNER is to become the first choice for people travelling long distance along the East Coast. That is challenging at times because we compete with the likes of Ryanair in normal times, BA and EasyJet on the London-Scotland route, and between West Yorkshire and London, we're competing with the car and with the M1, and surprisingly, a lot of people still travel by car between Yorkshire and the southeast. So our mission was really to refocus the entire business around our customers, obviously leveraging the opportunities that were presented to us with our fleet of new Azuma trains. And we really wanted to instill the passion and take advantage of the passion that our frontline teams have to deliver the best customer experience and to really make that a standout feature. So we did these workshops, and what did we find out? Well, of course, we identified really that once you boil it all down, it is all about our people and making sure that they can nail the basics and have the confidence to go above and beyond to make a customer's journey extra special. Yes, of course, it's about running a service reliably, but when you're sat on a train for 2, 3, 4 hours, as many of our customers are, we can really make something of the experience. And the direct engagement that our frontline teams have is crucial to helping us strengthen our relationship with our customers. We're a long distance operator, and one of the features of that is that we don't have such regular contact with our customers as train operators who have large numbers of commuters. Therefore, our aim is to provide a brilliant customer experience every time, because for our business, it may be the only time in the year that you have the opportunity to create that impression with that customer. And as I said, if the journey goes wrong, if the customer has not a great experience, then absolutely there is a risk that we will lose them to the airlines or back to the road for their next journey. 97% of our customers are making journeys which we class as discretionary, so they're not travelling to or from work, they're actually choosing to travel with us for a leisure trip or for a business trip. We've really got to work hard to win their travel and win their revenue. So one of the things we did was an extensive program of personalised communication, which we brought in. So what does that mean? So if you book through lner.co.uk, we've now got in place a suite of personalised emails, texts, and also Facebook Messenger messages that we will give you to provide customers with pre-departure information. So what do you need to know before your journey, but also real-time updates. And this is something that we're able to develop continually and refine to take into account customer needs. And after the journey, of course, we'll send you a little message saying, how was your journey? So that we get real-time feedback, and it genuinely is real-time. We get 8,000 or so customers feeding back to us each week, and so we get really granular feedback, much better than you get from the National Passenger Survey that Transport Focus do twice a year. A lot, so of course, is about the basics, ensuring that our trains depart and arrive on time, and the importance of having our frontline colleagues clearly visible, keeping our trains clean, which has taken on a whole new emphasis over the past few weeks, as you can imagine, and helping customers during disruption. This is all the expectation that our customers have, and so for us it's important that we meet those. We are at the same time trying to keep things simple, and the moment, a big topic of debate in the industry has been around fares. And one of the advantages that we have at LNER is we are owned by the DfT. And so we've been able to engage in a single leg pricing trial to try and address some of the confusion and distrust that exists around the fare system. And before the coronavirus crisis hit us and hit our revenue line, I'm pleased to say that the initial revenue results from that were really encouraging. So that was the first C, customer. Next C is collaboration. And this is really reflecting the fact that our railway is a system. We're only able to succeed at getting our customers from A to B thanks to the disparate efforts or the efforts of many disparate industry teams playing their part. Here's a picture which shows that quite visibly. This is the East Coast Main Line south of Peterborough, one Sunday in January last year, just over a year ago. And of course, it's a scene that our customers never normally see, our train crew never normally see, we never normally see it, and yet without these people doing their job, we certainly wouldn't be able to run the train service that we do as a train operator. Our frontline customer experience teams are the actors on the stage that the customers see, but of course behind the wings and behind the scenes are the track designers, the power system controllers, the signallers, the fitters, the civil engineers and the project managers, all of whom have a part to play in keeping the trains running and getting our customers from A to B safely and on time. So collaboration in our industry is really, really important. It's probably more important than it has ever been. Taking that whole system view is difficult given our industry structure, but because of the way that we use our rail network, it is so important that a whole system view is taken. The East Coast Digital Programme is something that is coming, and this is a really great example, I think, of how collaboration across the industry is coming about. We're badging it as the next generation railway, and it is a truly cross-functional collaborative approach that a number of players across the industry are playing. You see there what it's going to mean in practice. This is one of the non-executive directors of Network Rail having a go on our Azuma simulator, which is already set up for digital signalling. So we can simulate and demonstrate the benefits of digital in-cab signalling and really prove the benefits are there. And here on this slide, it just gives you an idea of the number of players and operators that are part of this program. So we're taking a really collaborative approach to this program. The idea is to bring in-cab signalling onto the southern end of the East Coast Main Line from 2024 onwards. Complete revolution in how we'll operate the railway at the south end of the East Coast Main Line. And so we've got some real stretching collaboration going on. And on the next slide, this is all going to be about the benefits. So many projects that we have in the industry, we talk about the physical works, the new services that we're going to run, things like that. But at the end of the day, it's all about the benefits that these projects deliver. It's about whether we are carrying more customers to their destinations more safely and getting people to their destinations and home on time. A couple of other examples of collaboration. So we've been starting to make some real inroads in terms of how we work with Network Rail. The East Coast Partnership is something that the previous Transport Secretary announced back in 2017 now, and we've been bringing that into fruition with various initiatives. Most recently, we've appointed a joint head of performance who works across both LNER and Network Rail, and they're specifically tasked with identifying and delivering performance improvements for our customers. And as part of that, we no longer pay Schedule 8 payments to each other for delays. And instead, the focus is on eliminating delays and improving punctuality. And I'm absolutely delighted by some of the early progress that we've been able to achieve there, just by getting teams across LNER and Network Rail working together on eliminating delays. My next C is carbon, something that Maggie's touched on already. Of course, last June, the UK passed the Net Zero law with the requirement to end the UK's contribution to climate change through achieving net zero carbon by 2050. It's snappily called the Climate Change Act 2008-2050 Target Amendment Order 2019. It's perhaps not the easiest, most bit of legislation that you'll find, but as we all know, absolutely critical in terms of the future of our planet. And as Maggie's touched on, rail's got a fundamental role to play in decarbonising transport. And I just wanted to share with you a bit of data that we've seen since we introduced Azuma. So this is out of our safety and environmental board pack. This graph shows the traction carbon emissions from running our trains each period. Each of the columns is a 4-weekly railway period. And one of the things that we did just before Christmas is we withdrew our high-speed trains from service on the East Coast route. So we went from a fleet of 45 trains, a third of which were diesel trains, and which ran the length of the East Coast main line using diesel, even though the route south of Edinburgh is electrified. The Azuma trains that we brought into service are bi-mode, so they're able to take advantage of the electrification. And you can see at the right-hand side of that graph just what it's done to our carbon emissions. We're really talking about a 50% reduction in our carbon emissions as a result of bringing our new trains into service. So electrification plays a key part in decarbonising travel in the UK and decarbonising rail further. And our bi-mode Azuma trains that we have, and also the bi-mode trains that other operators have, GWR, TPE, East Midlands, Hull Trains and Greater Anglia. These all offer the opportunity for progressive decarbonisation by targeted extensions of the electrified network. They've got diesel trains, but where the electric network exists, they're able to use that. And so if we can restart a programme of progressive electrification, we're going to be able to cut our carbon emissions as an industry even more. Scotland's already restated its ambition to electrify the routes between its 7 cities. So we're looking forward to further carbon reductions as our Azuma trains will be able to stay in electric mode for more of their journey. But the key, of course, is to do the extension of our electrified network in an affordable way. And of course, then to have the foresight and discipline to deliver these projects within their budgets. My 4th C is coronavirus. It is, as Maggie's touched on, a quite extraordinary time for us as a country and of course as an industry. We are running a special service at the moment at LNER, as indeed most TOCs are, running, in our case, a service that's about 40% of normal levels, but passenger numbers are down to 10% of normal levels, as highlighted by Network Rail's footfall data published yesterday. Our priority right now is on the health and well-being of our workforce. Nothing else really matters more. And to keep a service running so that we can get the nation's key workers to work and back home again safely. And of course, we're doing our bit as well to reinforce the government's stay-at-home advice for everyone who isn't a key worker. But this is having an impact on our market. and an impact that's probably not been seen for over 100 years. And of course, many of our customers are now discovering video conferencing technology, things like Zoom, Microsoft Teams. So what does this mean for our industry? As Maggie said, in respect of freight, we don't yet know. There was some research published yesterday by LEK, which has indicated that working from home might lead to a 20 to 25% reduction in commuter travel when life returns to normal. That's one scenario. That might not be right. One thing we do know is that rail has proved to be incredibly resilient to wider changes in society over recent years. When you talk to our business customers, they really value eye-to-eye contact when doing business. We see that just in terms of the success of the conference and events industry, for example, in recent years. And we know how people love to use their leisure time to travel and explore. And of course, for us as an industry, we've got some real fundamental strengths. We are an industry that is much lower carbon in terms of our impact than some of the other modes that we compete with. We're highly efficient in terms of our land take, and we offer the ability to move people and goods in and out of our cities in large quantities and at speed, and no other mode really matches us in our ability to do that. So the post-COVID era will bring us a next normal, and it will be different to what we've known. But I think we can really have confidence in our prospects because people will still want to connect, they'll want to meet, and they will want to work together. And because of our low carbon credentials, we are better placed than many. And finally, my final C is crazy ideas. We do work in an industry, as you'll know, that is almost embalmed in established protocols. As an example, our ticketing regime is based on a written agreement that was written before the internet. The wording in our franchise agreements is 25 years old, really, in parts. And of course, these agreements were famously written for a situation of industry decline rather than the record-breaking levels of rail travel that we've recorded in recent years. But of course, we don't live in the 1990s anymore. We've now got Deliveroo, Uber, Airbnb, Zoom, Tesla, and all sorts of other startups challenging the status quo and raising customer expectations. So as an industry, we need to challenge ourselves to ensure that we act swiftly to deliver the expectations of tomorrow's customers and to even lead some of the innovation that we see in society. What are we doing at LNER? We have got our innovation program, which we were just hoping to really put a lot of emphasis behind again this year, but we'll get that going later on once we're out of the current situation. And another thing that we've been doing is we've placed huge emphasis on diversity. And we've brought in some excellent people into the business in several key roles from outside of the rail industry to help us challenge our established thinking, and particularly in terms of the customer experience. Railway expertise is, of course, still something we value highly, but we've complemented that with fresh thinking to ensure that we deliver a service that our customers expect when they touch other sectors. We have to do that because of the competition that we face if we don't. Adrian Morehouse, the Olympic swimmer, now runs a training company, and one of the things he says is treasure your misfits, treasure the people in your team who do challenge your thinking and come up with those great ideas. So my final message is to treasure the misfits in your teams, challenge our industry's conventions, and please come up with some crazy ideas. Thanks for listening.
Hello everyone. We've been having some technical difficulties since the start, trying to help figure out what's going wrong with Tim Wood's microphone. So I think what we'll do is we will test to see if we make Tim a presenter if his mic will start working. However, if not, I've spoken to Tim and he has agreed we can do a Northern Powerhouse Rail event separate to this. So that's our plan B. Let's try this, everyone. Hold on. Tim, we now see your talk. Can you share your webcam with us and try and see if we can? I'm going to try this for 20 seconds and then I'm going to move on to questions, Tim. Bonnie, can we end the presenting, please? I think the best option is to now move on to questions with Maggie and David, as we haven't been able to get Tim Wood's microphone working or his software working still, unfortunately. Okay, so I've got a few questions sent in during the talks today. Maggie, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Everything today seemed to work reasonably smoothly, apart from unfortunately we've been shown an unmuted mic from Tim. We've been able to see certain things working. However, I think it might be actually the hardware. The microphone isn't working. So as mentioned, we're going to do a separate event with Northern Powerhouse Rail, and we'll move straight on to the questions. So first question is from Simon Harding, and it's on capacity. What sort of improvements are we seeing in terms of performance, ability to meet supply chain needs as a result of the extra capacity on the network? And that is to both Maggie and Tim. Not Tim, sorry, David, I apologise.
So in terms of the current situation, obviously nobody wants to be in a situation where there are a lot less passenger trains on the network, of course. But actually the running times that we're attaining in freight have been absolutely eye-watering. Up and down the west coast with the Class 88 on, we've seen a single Class 88 pull 800 metres of containers and maintain, indeed beat the timings. Last weekend we came up David's east coast to avoid possessions on the west, got there well ahead of schedule. The Drax trains, I've said already, are doing 4 hours instead of the usual 7 or 8. Of course, we understand on a congested network that it's not going to be possible to maintain that, but I think it's a really interesting demonstration of the capability of the equipment that we've got and the sort of the frustrated abilities that we have in running on a mixed traffic network. And what I'm hoping is it'll bring some real impetus to people who are looking at what we can do around scheduling to get, 20 minutes off here or 10 minutes off here or a better routing there, or understanding where those constraints have been biting. Now that we've tried it without them, we might be able to do a bit better on making incremental improvements, even as the passenger service resumes to normal levels.
Thank you very much, Maggie. David?
Yes, I agree. I mean, for us, it's not so much an improvement in journey times that we've seen, but a massive improvement in terms of reliability and punctuality. And, we're running 40% of our own services. And of course, the train operators around us are running a lot fewer services as well. And one of the variables, of course, that's been removed in terms of performance is the customers. We're seeing much quicker dwell times at stations, for example. So there are absolutely some learnings from the current time, which we've got to identify and then apply going forward. When you take the East Coast route, fundamentally we're running on the same infrastructure that has been there since the early 90s, when there were 100 East Coast trains on the network. We now run 160 per day, and of course other operators run many more. So we are trying to squeeze a lot of trains out of our rail network around the UK. And of course, we've seen as we take a few services off, it becomes a lot easier and we can hit some amazing performance figures. So I know the industry performance colleagues are trying to work out what are the bits that we absolutely need to protect when we put the normal timetable back, so that we retain some of this great performance.
Absolutely. I've seen how knackered planners look after their days at work. So yeah, completely see where you're both coming from. So we've got a second question here, again from Simon. Does the above question, so his last question, mean we should consider the priority with which freight is treated on the network? I guess to you, Maggie, for that.
Well, I mean, obviously it'd be nice to say yes, but I think we have to reflect the realities with which, we're faced. But I think for me, the point that matters is have people begun to understand that we provide value? Because too often I think people dismiss freight as an irritation because they don't understand the value proposition that sits behind it. It's very easy to say, I want all the freight trains off the Castlefield corridor, for example, as famous people have been doing. Actually understanding that those were the trains that brought the toilet rolls into Manchester, I'm hoping will resonate differently in the future. It won't necessarily make the decisions any easier in terms of the operation and the capacity of the network. That's always going to be a challenge on a busy network. But if people understand why we're there and the value that we bring to the economy, then what I'm hoping is that they will be more informed in making those decisions in the right way.
Thank you very much. David, do you have thoughts on that question?
Yes, I mean, I think that it is absolutely worth looking again at the balance, and the situation that we're in now, where logistics around the country is sort of massively challenged, and rail is absolutely able to play its part by taking more goods faster city centre to city centre at the moment. We're able to demonstrate just quite what can be done. And I do think that there is a case for the industry looking again at how it does use capacity and timetable some of these freight services, because there aren't that many freight services that use the network. And if we can speed some of them up and improve the attractiveness of rail to the distribution market, there's probably some opportunity for our sector in that. So I think it is worth looking at it. It's about getting that balance right, and as Maggie said, it may look odd sometimes when a container train rolls through Manchester Oxford Road, and people are stood on the platform thinking, hang on a minute, where's my train home? But those trains are bringing vital supplies, and there aren't that many of them.
Absolutely. So we did try and get Tim working again there. Unfortunately, we've had no hope. So we'll go to the third question. So question 3 is for Maggie. The Williams Review has had a real focus on passengers, and with an even further shift in focus. How will freight hold its own and continue to contribute to the regional economies? Greater passenger path requirements leave less capacity for freight, which, as you describe, has seen a great deal of investment. How can freight address this disparity and hold its own? That question's from John Ryan.
Okay, great question. I mean, I don't think any of us quite know what's going to happen with the Williams review. I mean, even before the current crisis, it seemed to be disappearing backwards at a rate of knots in terms of its publication date. And, you know, I think that's a shame, really, because certainly we've had a very good relationship with the people on the Williams team. Keith Williams himself is a businessman. He's the chair of Royal Mail, who are a rail freight user. He's been involved with John Lewis and Heathrow and understands how freight moves and why it matters. So, you know, I was reasonably optimistic that the outcome from Williams would provide a framework on which we could start work to try and re-establish how best we play on the network in the future. For me, I think that the core of Williams and the core of the debate that had been taking place around that was about the balance of local and regional versus national. And it's absolutely imperative for us that we have a good relationship at a local and regional level, particularly for individual terminals, planning and so on. But freight is a nationwide business. In fact, it's a global business. So, you know, one of the products at the moment that the ports are shipping flat out is paper pulp, because we're making a lot of toilet roll in the UK. That's being imported to the UK from Scandinavia, sadly not by train as it happens, but it just goes to show what a global world we're in terms of freight and logistics. So trying to explain to a shipping line whose parent company is in Denmark and goes to 200 countries all over the world that now this piece of railway is operated by the Mayor of Birmingham and they can't get access on it is a bit of a no-no, really. So what we've got to get is the balance right between the aspirations at a local and regional level, which are perfectly legitimate in local passenger and commuting, and a national framework, which means that we can still run efficiently. Because if you take a decision in the centre of Glasgow or the centre of Birmingham, it's messing up the passing at Felixstowe or Southampton or somewhere else across the network. That balance is what it's all about for me.
I guess it sort of comes back to what David was talking about in his talk, where we need to have a more integrated approach as an industry, make sure we have everyone around the table and making these decisions rather than making a decision in isolation. Okay, thanks very much for that, Maggie. Question 4, with a push for electric cars and higher general usage for electricity across the UK, do we have enough power production to support this agenda for electrification? That question is from James Taylor and to the panel.
Shall I kick off? I mean, it is absolutely something that often gets forgotten, I think, in many of the projects that we've done as an industry. It was something that on the East Coast route, we've had a power supply upgrade on the south end of the route. And we realised at quite a late stage of introducing the Azuma trains that actually we needed to boost the power supply to the rail network at the north end of the East Coast main line as well, and that work's now very much underway. And then, yeah, the question is, how does the UK increase the supply of electricity, both in totality and in the right places, because we are going to be driving electric cars, we're going to be using electric trains, and more use is going to be made. The specific challenge I think that we have as a rail network is we go through the countryside. So if you take the north end of the East Coast main line, it's going to mean putting power feeders in remote places, in the borders between Newcastle and Edinburgh, for example. So there's some specific challenges that we've got to address, but there's some really good engagement between Network Rail colleagues and the power networks to make sure that they're geared up and they're anticipating our needs. And of course, I think since the climate change targets were set last summer, there's a real focus from every department in government to just how do we meet these targets as a country. The Treasury were getting very focused on it before the coronavirus crisis. So I think we can be confident that the right things are starting to be done if they weren't already.
Maggie?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually it's a bit of an opportunity for the railways because, you know, David's quite right about the challenge that having the right power supply is, you know, creating, particularly on places like East Coast North. But actually, if you looked across the rest of the economy and the challenges that having the right power supply is for domestic homes and for heavy freight and logistics, then it's vastly bigger as a problem. You know, I've heard of people who've tried to run all electric vans out of their depots in cities and found that there simply isn't enough local distribution even for the demands of an electric van. So although, Elon Musk has invented a battery lorry and there are people pushing very hard on that sort of weight and battery capability for HGVs, the charging infrastructure is decades away. And the same is true of hydrogen fueling, which is the other sort of nascent technology for HGVs. And actually on the railway, although doing electrification is not always cheap and we've had our fingers burnt once or twice and there are some challenges, it's proven, we know how to do it, we've got people who are experienced at it. We just have to do more of it and persuade Treasury to put the investment in there. Whereas all the competing modes have got to invent something new and do even more fundamental costs and development. So I think, we could get there first if we focused.
I think that's a really good answer, Maggie, and I think it leads quite nicely into the next question. Are you guys okay with another couple of questions?
Sure.
Yeah.
David? Brilliant.
Yes.
So how do we persuade the public and politicians to invest in our rail infrastructure to improve reliability, journey times and capacity? That's from David Bamford again. I'm sorry I'm picking people twice, but I thought that was a good question.
Yes, if I just explain, so in relation to the East Coast upgrade and the big project that's still being delivered at the moment, we were hoping to put a dive under junction in at Warrington on the East Coast route in the summer. I think that's going to go back a bit, but there's a lot of investment coming in, and it's all based on a business case of getting journey times down between Edinburgh and London so that we can attract people off the planes, and extra trains as well so that we provide extra capacity. Of course, one of the things we hear from customers is they want cheaper fares. Now, we can do cheaper fares, but we really need extra capacity so that we can do cheaper fares. So the case is absolutely being made and has been made for faster journeys and for more capacity. And the investment that's being made is to deliver those. I think the challenge becomes around performance, because in many cases it's been that I think the industry struggled to make business cases around performance, but the business case is there. We just need to get better at communicating it and presenting it. I get a report from Network Rail every period which tells me how much poor performance has cost me as a business, and if you add those reports up, it comes to £160 million a year just for LNER. So we ought to be able to come up with some really good schemes to reduce the losses associated with that to us as an industry. There'll be a big figure if you add it up across the industry, and I think we probably do need to get a bit better as an industry at making the case for investment to improve our performance.
Absolutely. I think it's funny, isn't it? Because a few decades ago, when other countries were building high-speed lines, we thought we'd try and put tilting trains on our lines to solve the problem rather than building new lines, like you sort of alluded to in your talk, David. Maggie, do you have anything you'd like to say to that question?
Yeah, well, I have a bit of a mantra, which is that politicians are going to be political. And I think often, the railways employs a lot of engineers who are used to a world, and that isn't how the political cycle works. So I think we all ought to pay double attention to our engagement with politicians. You can never do too much of that. And, I say to my members, who is your local constituency MP for that terminal? And the people who are good at this stuff get out their spreadsheet and they tell me who it is and when they last engaged with them. So we need to be much more vocal about the positives of our industry at a backbench level, I think, very often. So we tend to focus very much on the people who've got the transport brief, not the people who sit behind that. And of course, they hear about the railways from their constituents. That's usually a negative, whether that's poor performance or noise or whatever. And so we need to work harder, I think, at getting that engagement across the political cycle and the political sphere. to make sure that we're building the story. I think the other thing I would say, and David's alluded to this about, you know, if you want investment, you've got to persuade a politician to get it over the line, but you've got to persuade a civil servant to release the money. And that comes down to business case and appraisal. And I actually think that, you know, the way we've been doing appraisal is no longer fit for purpose. You know, in David's case, it happens to be that the schemes you're pursuing are about journey time. So that's great because appraisal works for journey time improvements. If what you're trying to do is decarbonise, it doesn't work at all. So when we assess a scheme to take a lorry off a road, we get about 90 pence worth of credit for road decongestion. That's about journey time on the roads. We get 6 pence for carbon. So when we're trying to look at schemes that are about decarbonising, we've got to try and unlock that appraisal process and find ways to better value the outcomes that we now need the railway to deliver.
Thank you very much to both of you. I've got a question here from Simon Kendler. HS2 has been in the news a lot, particularly with clearance work starting. What impacts do you anticipate from HS2 for freight and long distance passenger service on the classic network?
HS2, yes.
Maggie first.
So, I mean, one can't not support HS2. It's a hugely important scheme. It will transform our railways. It will be a decade of work from our members in supplying construction materials to and from it. And everybody hopes that south of Crewe we'll get some released capacity, and that will be massively beneficial to passenger and freight services on that corridor. So in and out of New Terminal at Northampton, up to Manchester and so on. But of course, we know that there are bits of the network where HS2 creates challenge, and north between Crewe and Scotland is one of them, and I expect with phase 2B around Sheffield will be another one, and where we have bits of the network which would be full by any description today. So Crewe Scotland is pretty busy today. Trying to put 2 extra trains on it is always going to be problematic. And the arguments that we're making is just because they're your new trains, it doesn't mean they get more priority than the existing trains. And it's that battle that is quite hard to resolve at the moment. And what I'm really hoping is that now the political process has been resolved, we've got the approvals going forward, we can now start having a properly coherent conversation about how to make the best use of that capacity, and if necessary, the upgrades that need to come with it to make sure that everybody can continue to operate in the way they have.
Thank you, Maggie.
I think from a long distance high speed operator point of view, you know, clearly it's going to change markets when it arrives and when it opens to customers. Clearly it's going to affect the West Coast route first, which is reflected in the West Coast franchise, and that was let as a partnership to support that transition. It's going to be, I think, many years before HS2 has an impact on the east side of the country. But you know, this stuff is really important. Over the past 25 years, of course, we've seen passenger numbers grow in every sector of our industry by far more than double, and with decarbonisation, you know, we've got to expect that to continue. And the challenge that has presented is every last bit of capacity on our network is now pretty much used up. I remember being told over about 10 years ago now that there were no paths left for extra freight trains through Leicester, as an example. And you know, when you think of the opportunities that we've got, that's a difficult problem to hear. So HS2 is going to give the country a whole host of extra capacity. We've got to adjust and prepare for that as an industry, as Maggie said, and then welcome the next schemes that will add extra capacity, which no doubt Tim would have referred to. So a really exciting time, a lot of investment, and as the government said, you know, it's not at the expense of existing investment either. As I've mentioned, we've got some really significant investment coming before HS2 opens. As an industry, we need to deliver that well.
Thank you very much. Should we do one more question? Or should we close? Yep. It's up to you guys.
One more.
One more. Okay, I'll try and pick a good one. I'll pick a short one. Would ERTMS give us the capacity we need to improve capacity in the short term?
It helps. I mean, it doesn't give us a huge amount of extra capacity when the railway's running well. I mean, we've done a number of scenarios on our simulator actually, where we assess the impact of ERTMS using it for different disruptive situations, particularly looking at the section of the East Coast Main Line between King's Cross and Huntingdon. And it offers us some real opportunities to improve performance, to reduce delays, and that will lead to some improvement in capacity on our network. But the capacity is pretty much determined by the signal spacing and the number of tracks that we run, quite honestly, that we have. So ERTMS will help a bit, but it's not the answer to the real capacity challenges that we've got. Personally, I think we should be putting double-decker trains in somewhere. So that will be my answer in terms of capacity. So there's a crazy idea.
I'll give you the briefing on loading gauge, David, if you like. I'm a bit of a pocketbook expert on that one after a lot of time on container trains. But for me on ERTMS, I agree. It's not the transformational thing on capacity that some people would have you believe. But I would say, well, if we're not going to do ERTMS to replace our signalling, what are we going to do? So are we really going into the future of our country with Stockport, with lever frame signalling, or IECCs which are degrading day in, day out, and which you can't interfere with without real hazard? So if we don't think ERTMS is the answer, then will please somebody tell me what it is, because we're going to need to signal our railway. And equally, we need to have a level of technology in the railway which fits with other sectors today. If you looked at what they do in air traffic control, or what even the average road fleet can do in terms of track and trace and monitoring and scheduling, we're not even in the same page of the book. So digitising the way the railway works feels to me like a fundamental thing that we have to do. And if we did that and we ended up with the same capacity but lower cost, more reliable, and more modern, an industry that people wanted to work in, then that surely is a win in its own right. And if we can get a bit of capacity and reliability out, so much the better.
Thank you very much for your time answering those questions. So I'd like to finish up and say the vision that David and Maggie illustrated requires a skilled workforce, and I believe it's a collective duty of ours to understand how we address this challenge. Having industry leaders come and speak to us like this, in my opinion, helps create an open and transparent environment, and encourages people to be collaborative, which is what we need to break down some of the barriers in our industry, rather than just accepting when we speak to each other that we can sometimes work in silos. I really hope everyone enjoyed watching the event. I apologise for the technical difficulties. It's a new piece of software for us, and we're trying, as everyone else is, in this crisis. It's tough, and we might not get it right the first time, but we will get it right eventually. I would encourage those watching who enjoyed the events to make use of the YRP's events to expand your network and your knowledge of the railway. I find it myself a really welcoming community, and I've learned a lot that I wouldn't have otherwise in my own job. If you'd like to get involved with regional committees, please let us know in the feedback from the event. If you can sort of get past the technical difficulties, pop it on the ends. And yeah, that's the main thing I'd like to finish on, really. Maggie, David, do you have anything else you'd like to say to the remaining audience we have?
Only just that you've got my details on the slide there, and or they'll get shared. And if we can help with anything on rail freight, or you've got a question you didn't get a chance to ask, just stick it through, and we'll do our best to answer it anytime.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Yourself, David?
Yeah, likewise. Contact us through LinkedIn, Twitter, and obviously, I think YRP is a great initiative. Would just reiterate what you said, Oliver, in terms of people, please do make full use of the resources, because I think it's a fantastic resource that we're lucky to have as an industry.
Thank you very much. With all that said and done, again, huge thank you to you, Tim. Huge thank you, Maggie. Apologise to those watching that we couldn't sort out the technical issues with Tim. However, I did speak to Tim during one of the talks, and Tim has agreed to do another event with us. So we'll make sure we iron out those difficulties before. So yeah, I'm going to end the webinar. All the best, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you later, Maggie. See you later, David. Cheers.